All right, let's go over the forearm muscles. So the forearm, just like the arm, the humeral segment, it has two compartments as well. And you have an anterior compartment and a posterior compartment. And your anterior compartment comprises the flexors and pronator muscles, and your posterior compartment is made up of the extensors and supinator muscles. And even though we call it anterior and posterior, the anterior compartment is more anteromedial and the posterior compartment is more posterolateral. So that is how we look at these groupings. And then I also want to say that the flexor compartment, these are a lot stronger and have a lot more cross-sectional area. It's estimated about 2 times greater in size and strength than the posterior compartment. So let's break this down a little bit. The other fun fact is that even though these muscles and majority of the muscle belly sits in the forearm, a lot of these will act on the hands and the fingers. And there's 2 reasons for this. One, we can store all of this muscle belly and cross-sectional area so that these muscles can produce force and act on our hand and the fingers without having all of that muscle in our hand and our finger. So we have these long tendons that enter our hand and act on our fingers, attached to our fingers, and this helps us to have the grip strength we need to do a lot of other things functionally. And the second reason for this is because our hands need to have the dexterity and need to be able to cup things in our palm, and we can't have this space filled up with a lot of the muscle that we need to have the force producing capabilities of our hands. So it's to maintain the dexterity and the fine-tuned motor skill of our hands and our fingers without muscles getting in the way of that and taking away from our hand and finger dexterity. So that's the reason why a lot of these forearm muscles are situated or oriented like how it is in the body. So let's go over the anterior compartment first. And actually, we'll do one side anterior compartment, we'll do the other side posterior compartment. So on this side, let's get rid of the brachioradialis. Let's hide some of these things so that we can see extensor carpi radialis. Let's hide that just so that we don't get confused here. You see supinator, you see the carpi radialis brevis. So let's hide all of these so that we don't get confused. Okay, so this is your medial epicondyle. That is a common attachment site for your flexor group, right? And we have in the anterior compartment, we have layers. Like with any other layers that we talked about in the back, they're distinct layers that these muscles or groups of muscles are situated in. And it is actually like this when you start to peel back and get from superficial to deep. So the 3 layers are, we have the superficial layer, we have the intermediate layer, and we have the deep layer. So the superficial layer is comprised of 4 muscles. And the 4 muscles are pronator teres. So this is pronator teres right here. Then you're gonna have your flexor carpi radialis. So this is on the radial side of your forearm. Then you're gonna have palmaris longus, which I'll talk about in a second. And then you're gonna have flexor carpi ulnaris. So those are the 4 muscles of the superficial layer. Now palmaris longus, not everyone has this. And I don't know the stat off the top of my head. I think it's like 17% of the population don't have one or both palmaris longus. And the way to test this is to do that opposition squeeze between your thumb and your pinky and flex your wrist. And then if you see a distinct tendon pop out, then you'll see it on that side. And it's that tendon going right in the middle of your wrist. And palmaris longus really attaches to your palmar aponeurosis. So because of that, there is not a huge significance. So if you don't have it, it's not like you have limited wrist strength or function. And this is actually, the fun fact is that this is the tendon that they'll use to reconstruct your ulnar collateral ligament, your UCL, or what is commonly known in modern day as Tommy John surgery. So you see that in your baseball athletes who have ruptured or damaged their UCL. This is the tendon that they'll take to reconstruct their UCL. So that is why palmaris longus, not everyone has it. It's not a super critical muscle, so if you don't have it and you fall into that 17% or so of the population that doesn't have it, you won't lose any sleep over lack of function or strength. So collectively, that is the superficial layer. So let's go over it one more time and hide them. So pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, and flexor carpi ulnaris. So that is that group. Then you'll see a big muscle group that will eventually split into 4 distinct tendons. And this is your flexor digitorum superficialis. So this muscle, what's interesting about it is that the superficialis, it will, so let's hide the palmar aponeurosis so that we can see a little bit. So your flexor digitorum superficialis, what it actually does is it creates these tendons, and then it actually has a split, and it looks like this in the body. And it splits because this is going to attach to your middle phalanx. Therefore, it can flex your PIP, your proximal interphalangeal joint, but it cannot flex your DIP, your distal interphalangeal joint. And that is because, again, it splits to attach on your middle phalanx to flex that PIP joint. And why it splits is because underneath that, your flexor digitorum profundus, I think this will work. Oh, let me remove the sheath, hide that. Your flexor digitorum profundus tendon will go all the way up, but will attach to the distal phalanx. So that can flex both your proximal and distal interphalangeal joint. So your flexor digitorum profundus flexes all the joints in your finger. Your flexor digitorum superficialis only flexes your PIP joint, your proximal interphalangeal joint. So that's where this split happens. And it looks exactly like this in the body. You'll see that split that happens. So, and you can already see that when I highlighted flexor digitorum profundus, right underneath superficialis, you can see some of that. So first, let's hide superficialis. And then underneath that, so superficialis is the only muscle in that intermediate layer. Now underneath that, we're in the deep layer, and we're gonna see 3 muscles. We're gonna see flexor digitorum profundus. So these muscles, you're gonna see the long tendons that it goes all the way to the distal phalanx of what we just saw. So I'm gonna hide that. And then you're going to see flexor pollicis longus. Pollicis means your thumb. So this is going to be the flexor that flexes your thumb joint. And again, this is going to flex your entire thumb joint all the way to that interphalangeal joint. So that is your flexor pollicis longus. And then this square or rectangular muscle is called your pronator quadratus. And just like its muscle is named, it will help to pronate your forearm and move and rotate that radius over your ulna. And this is your pronator quadratus. So that is the muscle layers of the anterior compartment of the forearm. So let's flip over and let me get oriented here. Let's get to the other side and let's go over the extensors. And remember, the extensors, they're going to be more on that posterior lateral area of the forearm, and we are going to see a lot of this. I'm going to walk you through all of this. I won't actually remove the anterior compartment muscles. We can just kind of use our best judgment to look at these. The orientation here isn't the greatest, but still yet it'll give you an idea as to where these muscles are sitting. So the posterior compartment, it has technically 2 layers, a superficial layer and a deep layer. And then there's also this third grouping called outcropping muscles, which I'll go over towards the end. So the superficial layer, these are your common extensors. And this is where a lot of them will originate on the lateral epicondyle of the humerus, as opposed to the medial epicondyle of the humerus for the flexor group. So this is where, again, it's a common insertion point of a lot of strong muscles pulling on that one common origin point. And because of that, it's a point that is at risk for developing tendonitis or any other types of overuse type of issues, just because you have a lot of tension being pulled on a single attachment or origin site. 2 of these muscles actually attach above the lateral epicondyle, and these are your brachioradialis. So right here, brachioradialis. And again, this is one of those that in the hammer grip position, it's contributing a little bit more to elbow flexion. So that is another reason why, when you go back to the arm video, another reason why in the supinated position, you can flex your elbow or curl the most. When you're in the hammer grip position, that's Second, because even though the biceps is not contributing as much, you still have brachioradialis contributing a little bit. And then when you're in the pronated position, like reverse curls, you really took out the contribution from your biceps and from your brachioradialis, which is why you're the weakest in the pronated position for curls, like reverse curls. So anyway, this is brachialis. Let's hide that. So this attaches above the lateral epicondyle. I won't go into the details of that, but just know that it attaches proximal to the lateral epicondyle. And then you're going to have extensor carpi radialis longus, which also attaches above the lateral epicondyle. So let's hide that. Then you're going to be in the layer of the rest of the common extensors that's attaching on the lateral epicondyle. So you're going to have extensor carpi radialis brevis. Let's hide that. You're going to have extensor digitorum. Then you're going to have extensor digiti minimi, which is acting to extend the pinky finger. And then you're going to have extensor carpi ulnaris. So that is going to act on the ulnar side of your wrist and extend your wrist. So those are the common extensor muscles, and that comprises the superficial group. So now when we go into the deep group, this is where you're going to have supinator. So you can see that muscle, and it is going to act to help to supinate. And again, like I mentioned, really when your elbow is flexed, your bicep is one of the strongest supinators, and you can see how it's attaching to the radius right here. This is your biceps tendon. And then the supinator is also going to help to control and contribute to that motion of supination. So let's hide the supinator. And then you're going to have extensor indices. So from here, you can just look at indices as your pointer finger. So this is the tendon, so this is extensor indices. So you're going to have that as part of the deep group. Now, these remaining muscles, they are the outcropping muscles. And what's kind of interesting is that the rest of the muscles, if you kind of saw them, they were spanning in a different kind of line of pull and orientation, where these muscles are going outwards like this. So that's why it's partly referred to as the outcropping muscles. And these are part of the deep layer as well, but because of their different orientation, we refer to them as outcropping muscles. So you have three muscles here. And these are muscles that make up the anatomical snuff box too, which I'll talk about a little bit here, but more in the next video. If you look at your own anatomical snuff box, the way that I remember this is that it goes from longus, brevis, longus, and then on the inside of the intrinsic hand muscles, you have the equivalent brevis. So how I remember this is that this first one right here is extensor pollicis longus. And this is where it'll go around that Lister's tubercle of your radius, which is why it has this weird orientation. And you can even see that, like when you extend your thumb and you look at your thumb, it looks like it's just coming out of like the middle of your wrist. And that's because it's bending around Lister's tubercle, which functions as a pulley to help to give your thumb a little bit more mechanical advantage to extend your thumb. So anyway, this is extensor pollicis longus. So let's delete that. Then you're going to have extensor pollicis brevis, because again, it alternates, right? So this is extensor pollicis brevis. Now we're on the outside of your thumb. So I always just remember this as abductor pollicis longus, because we're going to alternate longus, brevis, longus. So this is abductor pollicis longus. And then right here, actually, let me show you from the side view, right? So abductor pollicis longus, let me get oriented here and centered, right? And then this muscle right here on the thenar eminence of your hand, that is going to be abductor pollicis brevis. Let me see if I can get centered here. Okay, abductor pollicis brevis. That is not one of the posterior extensor compartment muscles, but it's just to make sense of why it's named certain things, because abductor pollicis brevis is within the hand and thenar eminence itself. So anyway, that is the outcropping muscles, and then that will take us to all of the muscles of the extensor compartment, or the posterior compartment of the forearm. The last thing that I'll leave off with is that, again, these muscles are very strong and they act on the wrist and the fingers. Your extensor group is not as strong as the flexor group, but again, all of the muscle belly to produce this type of force is stored or situated outside of the hand so that we can maintain that dexterity and fine-tune motor control with our hand, as well as have the ability to have some good grip strength and use our fingers and our hands forcefully as well. And that is very crucial in a lot of the sports that you think we're playing, how we can generate force with our hands, how we can grab things, grip things, how we can throw things, right? All of these types of functional tasks. So that is the muscles of the forearm, and organized in a way that you can understand the function and what these muscles collectively do to act on the wrist and the hand.